Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Coach's Corner. Very excited to be speaking with Joe, the co-founder of Aqualibre today, and have a lot in store. So as we're getting started, please be sure whether you're watching on YouTube or on X, we are live in both places. You can certainly ask questions. We will see your comments roll in as you're watching. Just going to actually circulate it. If you're watching on X, please go ahead and make sure that you've actually shared the page or the stream so that others can see it. I'm actually going to be sharing it myself right now on my main Funky feed. So have it in a couple places, but really looking forward to the conversation today. Joe, welcome to Coach's Corner. Really excited to have you here and talk about this. I've heard so many good things, especially from KP. Obviously, I'm invested in the project. I joined in the pilot sale early on, but let's rewind it a little bit. Take us back to the beginning. Like, what specifically brought you to Kujira? What was it about the Kujira network and ecosystem and the people here that really made Aqualibre want to do the pilot launch and just kind of make this their home?
Well, I think it's sort of been previously spoke about on various podcasts and launches prior, but it was completely random. Obviously, ended up meeting Hans at a pub in southwest London, which was a very random event, and we got talking. He overheard me actually discussing various aspects of our project and the carbon credits, and talking about bringing on chain. And you couldn't make it up in terms of the actual randomness of that conversation. Carried on and discussed many aspects of Kujira, and he raised the question whether we consider launching on actual Kujira as a project, and I said, well, that was certainly not on our radar at that time, and we obviously took that conversation forward. Obviously, introduced us to the pilot, and obviously in December last year, decided formally that we were actually going to take the project forward, launch on pilot. And that's exactly what we did. And it was a successful launch, and very glad we did it. Very glad to be part of the Kujira team. We've obviously built very good relations going forward with all the sort of co-founders, and they've helped us massively along the way. And we are here today, sort of 6-7 months later, ready to sort of take the project to sort of, I mean, we had our sort of, our launch was pilot, which was back in February. But I think we're now in sort of our sort of V2 launch stage. So, we've got the marketing team sort of launched. We're ready to sort of go. We've obviously got our deal that is very, very close, which I know we'd hoped to have obviously closed off sooner, but obviously stars didn't align that way. But we're here, we're still there, and I think the V2 launch is now very much with us. And it's a sort of part of a rebranding. We've obviously developed the staking module and everything else, so we're ready to go. This is, I would say, the official launch of Aqualibre V2 coming soon.
Very nice. Coincides with the V2 of Kujira that just launched recently. So,
Absolutely.
beyond that, let's talk just about the project in general. Like, what are the aims? What is Aqualibre really trying to accomplish with the project and what you're trying to build? I know a little bit, obviously, but maybe people who are watching for the first time don't know all that much. Like, can you kind of lay out the grand vision, if you will, for what you guys are trying to achieve?
Of course, and it's not that obvious, because the voluntary carbon market is a moving target, so to speak. So, whilst our objective is to obviously build a carbon exchange that institutions can buy, sell, trade carbon credits on. That is sort of one piece of the puzzle, and bringing it onto blockchain, yes, that's another piece of the puzzle, because obviously that offers the transparency and the audit trail of carbon credits. But the bigger picture is obviously to help assist and grow the voluntary carbon market, and offer a platform where it's not just about blockchain, although that is obviously where we're driving the business towards. It's also about custodian, AML, KYC. There's several pieces of the puzzle that need to be fulfilled, and actually expanding the carbon credit market to the institutions. And actually, why would they actually come and trade with our platform over some of the other sort of exchanges that are out in the marketplace? And that's what we've been primarily working with in the background to actually establish how we can actually get all those moving parts together in one piece, so we can actually create an institutional grade platform exchange, shall we say, that actually can actually complement the carbon credit market and invite institutions to come and trade with us and buy credits via Aqualibre with confidence.
Nice. So one thing that people maybe who are just Web3 natives don't really understand or appreciate, like my actual company that I work for, my full-time role, when I'm not being Coach Kuji, is a company called Global Stake, which is an infrastructure provider, but it's institutional scale and grade and everything else. We run only our own bare metal servers. Once you start trying to integrate sort of legacy Web 2 businesses with Web 3, the hurdles are tremendous, right? Like just even some of those things that you mentioned for those who are watching, and maybe, everybody knows KYC, maybe you don't know AML, the anti-money laundering, for instance, or KYB for know your business. And a lot of times when you're talking to these legacy Web 2 companies, it involves tons of due diligence on both sides and NDAs going back and forth. And it's really something that takes a long time to come to fruition. We've seen that we have a charity project, for instance. And so I know that there's been an expectation for many people to like close the big first deal and so on and so forth. But I don't think people really appreciate either how long and tedious sometimes these processes can be when you're sending terms of service back and forth, and lawyers have got red lines and all this other stuff. But it's great that you guys are persevering to do this. Is it certain kinds of institutions or customers that you're looking for to maybe introduce them to using this kind of carbon credit market?
No, look, the market's there. It's obviously in its infancy, and it needs to be expanded. But there is a whole host of clients that would obviously require carbon credits, or certainly need to buy carbon credits, from all sectors, through the large corporates through to small SMEs. So, I mean, obviously, at the top of the chain, you've got your big oil and gas companies. Then you've got your big mining companies. Then you've got your banking sector, your insurance sector. So there's these are the big guys of who, the banks have lent to the oil and gas companies, so they need to offset in terms of their balance sheets. But the actual market itself is obviously there, and it's fragmented, and it needs to be brought into one sort of place. I mean, there's various standards, there's various methodologies, various verifications. So it's just a case of actually trying to sort of centralize the market, actually have a one-stop shop where people will understand where they can actually place the money, the capital, and actually work out how that capital can work for them as a business as well. Because carbon offsetting shouldn't be necessarily seen as a cost base for a business. It should be part of their ESG policies to actually benefit their business, their client base, their supply chain. So, there's so many different moving parts that need to be sort of worked out. But, and obviously with all the different, carbon credits that are on the market, ranging from sort of $3 up to sort of $600 per ton. I mean, it's a little bit of a minefield, but it's getting there. And unlike the mandatory market, which has sort of got framework of regulation, obviously the voluntary market is unregulated. But obviously at the same point, getting into a standard and the UN standards where there is a decent framework is obviously assisting, and it helps our business, it helps everyone. Now, it's just a case of obviously getting it to that stage, and every business that's in either offsetting or a project developer is obviously helping to obviously get towards that goal.
So, are there specific businesses that you guys are targeting that you feel are easiest to onboard to this kind of market, where maybe they haven't tapped into the carbon credit thing and they're looking for these kinds of solutions that they can then, because for us, for instance, it's a point of pride for us as a company, my employer, to really in fact, we're technically carbon negative because we had purchased so many credits that, and some of the SOC 2 compliant data centers that we're already running in are highly efficient in and of themselves. But from our co-founder's standpoint, they've been around for a very long time. They feel like this is sort of the right thing to do to try and help facilitate sort of that greener world and everything else. So is it a particular niche that you're targeting first, or are you just trying to, certain businesses that you feel are underserved or underrepresented and you're really going after them? Is there a particular rationale for how you guys are actually reaching out to businesses?
There's not a particular rationale per se. I think obviously the bigger polluters are the easier targets because obviously they require the most amount of offsets. Thereafter, I think there's on the smaller companies, as you get down towards the sort of SME, it's more of an educational process to sort of explain of why this could benefit your business, as opposed to obviously looking at it as a direct cost. And that involves obviously getting involved at ESG policy driven level, where offsetting shouldn't be the only solution to your business. The businesses first and foremost need to look at all aspects of their business where they can actually cut their emissions, look at all of their supply chains, and reduce their own emissions prior to offsetting. Offsetting shouldn't be a one-off solution, because I mean, and that's even though we're in the business of brokering or selling offsets, the reality is businesses need to do more than just you know offsetting a footprint that they otherwise could reduce by other means.
Do you guys actually do sort of like almost do you have sort of a consultative capacity where you're going to some of these companies that you're doing the outreach and starting with that educational piece, just kind of enlightening them in terms of how this can benefit them, how it can benefit the customer? Because if they're only seeing it as a cost, as you've mentioned, I figure like that's something you kind of have to work around in your conversations.
Yeah, and it also depends on how you sort of dress it up, because I think if you're going in at ESG policy level where you're creating a policy and you're already putting in foundations in play on how they can reduce emissions and their footprint, thereafter whatever's left then obviously can be the offset element, as opposed to going in straight away saying you just need to offset and don't worry about anything else, because that's the wrong mindset. And there's certain advisory firms and consultants that are doing that because obviously they're benefiting from the sale of the credits. Our philosophy is not about just going in and saying offset. If we're obviously building our network of guys from lawyers and accountants that are actually going in and putting these ESG policies in play, and obviously their whole ethos is about obviously reducing their emissions however they can ethically. And if there is anything left and they obviously still want to claim net zero targets, then obviously that's when the offsetting can obviously appeal, and obviously that can obviously kick in to and the benefits of why that does, as a forward facing business, what benefits does that gain you over your competitors? What benefits does that gain you over your competitors in terms of when you're putting in a tender? If you can claim to have net zero credentials, it very much helps. If there's two or three guys left in the race for a tender contract, and one client can obviously claim that he is net zero, but not just from offsetting, and he's done all of this other you know cool stuff in terms of looking at his supply chain and everything they can do internally, then it could be the difference between winning a contract or not, and that's where it should sit. And that's the difference between just offsetting for the sake of offsetting and actually trying to reduce everyone's emissions to drive the planet to sort of a net zero stage, as which is the goals.
Yeah, and it's a noble goal at that. You talked a little bit earlier about how it's kind of like a wild west in terms of how the credit system works, where some of them are charged more versus another. Is that because there are so many different kinds of brokers out there in the world, or is there a quality thing? Is it something qualitative where certain credits are worth more than others? Like, can you dig into that a little bit?
Well, there is no price point per credit. So as a green project, if you want to develop your own project, every project has their own costs. Okay, so every project's cost is different depending on whether they're an afforestation project, a deforestation project, or a green technology project. So the cost of issuance is based on, there's not a set price per ton. So the price is based on a green project develops a project, whatever that may be, and whatever their cost point per be to make it a viable project has to have a price per ton. Obviously, so that is what there's no matrix in terms of what the price is. If we were doing a direct air capture project, for example, that involves sophisticated technology at a cost, installation, all of the removal of the carbon, and there's obviously an unknown element of how much carbon you will sequestrate. Now that is why, say, for example, a direct air capture project, which is green tech, which is primarily classed as sort of your Rolls Royce of carbon credits, would command up to $500 or $600 per ton, as opposed to a deforestation project where they may just be protecting an area of land in the Amazon, may command $3 or $4 a ton. And the reason for that is because for the direct air capture project, which is primarily funded by research and development and evolution of technology, as we know it will evolve over the next 5-10 years, to obviously someone ring fencing an area of the rainforest, which is still perfectly a great project and it needs to be done because we're losing acres of rainforest every day. But obviously there's a price point difference. Now, there's no one that's going to fund a direct air capture project if it costing you $400 to capture a ton. You obviously need to have the price point at 500 or 600 to make that project viable. Otherwise, you will never seek investment for that project. Whereas if you obviously are just ring fencing an area of the rainforest and protecting that, yes, you've got geospatial technology ensuring that there's no fire and there's no illegal logging, and you've obviously got some boots on the ground to obviously protect the areas. But you can sort of see then that is the reason why the price point is so different. But there's no price point per se. There's no fixed price per ton. It's purely down to what the project needs to obviously generate the revenue to survive as a project.
No, that's still a super helpful explanation. I mean, something that I didn't understand or know about. So I'm just learning as well. So most of these questions are just coming from my own curiosity.
No, I hope it sort of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense just hearing the explanation. So like, I mean, I was in my head, I was thinking of, like famously here in America where we have, I mean, it's declining, obviously, right? Like how much coal we use and mine. But I remember like when this started becoming a thing, even a couple of decades ago, they were starting to install sort of like these scrubbers on the smokestacks where the coal was being refined to try and remove as much carbon from going into the atmosphere. And so that's what I was wondering if that was like considered direct air capture. But that's really interesting, like the explanation of the type of project and how that's going to influence the price. There's over 50 people watching us right now, so I didn't realize that till just a moment ago. Thank you so much for everybody who's tuning in.
Good evening, everyone.
Appreciate it. If you have questions or comments, especially anything for Joe, you want to know more about a specific aspect of Aqualibre project, please go ahead and drop those comments, whether it's on X or on YouTube. They will come up in our StreamYard studio, so we can pull up those questions, and Joe is, I'm sure, going to be happy to answer them. Well, I know that you're currently sourcing deals, and there's one deal that has been closed. I don't know how much you can say about it because of NDAs and certainly understanding the way how this business works, especially like as I was saying earlier, when you're interfacing between Web 2 and Web 3. Can you give us like any kind of hints about what's coming, or maybe some like big announcement that doesn't violate the NDA? I'm sure people are super curious because I know there was going to be some, more information coming, I think this week or next. So just kind of curious and wanted to ask.
The deal that we, is not a secret. We talked about a deal that we've been working on. This actually particular deal we've obviously been involved with for nearly 18 months now. So, but it is definitely, most certainly, coming to a close. We're in the sort of very final stages. The delays, unfortunately, were due to a verification on the project developers, not through any fault of his own. It just, that was the requirement of there had to be a secondary verification, which has happened. I mean, there's project developers out there at the moment that we're speaking to on a daily basis that can't get verifiers at this point in time. So the fact that we've got verified and gone through that process, which is basically a secondary audit. So a project developer, just so people understand, a project developer will produce their own methodology, which will obviously be submitted. They will obviously have a verification internally where they will, technically verify their own work. And the third-party verification will be the actual, technically rubber stamp, like a third-party audit. Like if you're a company that has an annual audit of your accounts, you appoint a third party that comes in and effectively makes sure that everything that you've done as a project is right. The tonnage of carbon that you believe you are sequestrating or saving is correct. And that all has to go through a process. And that process is stringent and it takes time. And unfortunately, there were some delays. And, the carbon credit markets at the moment, everyone who's got a carbon project needs their credits verified before they can obviously be placed onto any registry or exchange to be sold. So there's unfortunately too many carbon. Well, not unfortunately, but there's at this particular point in time more carbon projects looking to be verified than there is verifiers. So there's obviously delays and there's bottlenecks, and obviously with any institutional deal, there's also lawyers and there's KYC and AML and everything that we've previously talked about. And unfortunately for us, as the guys that have obviously just placed the deal together, we don't necessarily have a saying certain aspect. Well, we have a say in a lot of aspects, but not in terms of verification. Is completely out of our control. We can't have any hands in that process. But that process has been done, and the credits will be on registry, I believe, as of early next week, which we can sort of share to our community, which we're happy to do. But this is, we put a lot of emphasis on this deal, and yes, it's a deal, and yes, it's a significant deal. A deal, I can't say the exact size, but put it this way, it's a bigger deal than most of the credits that have been sold in the Vera registry, which is one of the largest registries in Q1 and Q2, for example, combined.
Whoa.
So it's a significant deal. And it's
That's
a significant deal for a business that has been effectively in the market since February. It's a significant deal. And it's a deal that we are looking very much forward to rewarding our stakeholders with, and, and proving trust and the transparency with the team, because, we sold probably out on pilot on this deal. Now, from our perspective, this deal hasn't required a lot of work or manpower from our side pretty much since March, April, because obviously certain things have been out of our control. But what has been happening in the background is lots of other pieces of our puzzle, of which we haven't necessarily elaborated on to our communities, because until they're firmed up and moving forward, and ultimately we keep coming back to this deal. So it's the deal is great. It's for us, and certainly for me as a businessman, it's a great proof of concept. We've bought a buyer and a seller, and fingers crossed, everything smooths over and concludes. And on that basis, that to me is a proof of concept on a significant deal at an institutional level, which is why I'm in this sector. I'm not in this sector to be doing, tidbit deals. We want to put big deals, big corporates with big buyers, and do deals. And we've obviously been working on numerous other deals in the background. So in that respect, yes, deal is good. Deal. I think we can all take a deep breath and relax. But outside of big deal, there's been lots of other business going on in the background, of which obviously our community will be fully aware of in the coming weeks and months ahead.
That's awesome. Jerome has a question, but before I get to his question, I just want to ask, how do we, the verifier, the lack of verifiers that you mentioned, is the industry itself working toward a way to help reduce or potentially eliminate that bottleneck altogether? Like, are there people who, is it lawyers who are verifiers, or those specific people who have a particular type of credential that work as verifiers? Can you explain a little bit more about like who the verifiers
No.
are?
Yeah, of course. Verifiers are not lawyers. They're independent bodies that obviously have the in-house scientific teams to be able to delve through methodology, which is far over my head, and I won't even try and go into what creates a methodology, even though we obviously assist some firms in that respect. But it's a deep dive into the project. It's not leaving any stone unturned, establishing exactly, if you are, let's talk about a forestry project. The height of the trees, the fauna of the trees, everything has to be the root structure of the trees. So if you're claiming X amount of sequestration of carbon, it has to be backed up with evidence, and someone has to check that evidence and verify that evidence. We can't just put a back of a fag paper in and say, look, we're collecting 1,000 tons over here, no problem, rubber stamp. No, it has to be proven, and that verification part is the final rubber stamp to enable you then to onboard your credits onto a registry to enable guys like us to be able to sell them. And it's as simple as that. So
Wow.
without the verification, your credits aren't worth.
So yeah, that's really interesting because I did not know that at all. That people can basically just propose like, oh, hey, this is how much we're reducing, but until you have that formal verification process passed,
and they're all independent parties with all severe levels of public and private indemnity. So, in the event of anything goes wrong as a buyer and that verification somehow was unfounded, then obviously someone, is on the block, so to speak. So, the indemnity would obviously pay out. So it's not something that would taken lightly. Even if you were a verifier, you need to be very confident in your work before you give it the rubber stamp.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a very high level like auditor or something like that.
100%, exactly that. No different to signing off on a PLC's accounts.
Yeah.
If there's a black hole and you sign them off, it doesn't matter who you are. You've got to have some serious insurance to back that up.
No, absolutely. Well, and this maybe leads to part of the question that Jerome asked, and he had wondered, like, why would a buyer pay a higher price per ton if he can get it for cheaper? Is there such a thing as like the quality of a carbon credit, or who's issuing the credit, or anything like that?
It's not so much as a quality. A ton of carbon per se is a ton of carbon. It really, Jerome, depends on the buyer. So, for example, Amazon, your Googles, your Microsofts of this world, with their multi-billion-dollar balance sheets, and obviously they're tech companies, so they would quite happily pay $500-600 per ton for a green technology project. Because green tech, don't get me wrong, afforestation, deforestation, they're lovely, they're great projects, we need them. Obviously, developing tech that can solve our climate crisis is, as I mentioned before, the Rolls Royce of carbon credits. Real tech that can actually real world problem deserves, and then the reason why we pay more, as I mentioned earlier, because obviously it costs that much to actually sequestrate a ton of carbon. Whereas obviously a forest that's already been there for hundreds and thousands of years is already been there. It's just a case of preserving it. So that cost per acquisition is a lot less. And the reason why someone would buy a higher price is purely because they can, first and foremost, to say that they're supporting tech, which over time would obviously either drive the price down or up, either or. And obviously there might be companies out there that not necessarily customer facing per se, that actually for their own targets or tax purposes need to offset. So in that instances, you're going to go for the cheaper end of the spectrum. Do you want to drive a Ford or drive a Rolls Royce? It's the same question. They both get you to their destination.
Yes, they will.
Maybe.
No, yeah, that's true. Maybe depends on what that verifier thinks about your
Exactly.
vehicle. But thank you so much, Jerome, for asking a question. Again, we have 65 people now watching, so appreciate everybody tuning in to the live stream today. Again, questions, comments, anything like that, if you have for Joe, you can certainly field them. We'll see them here in the StreamYard studio. Let's talk a little bit more about sort of the future of where this is going, and like beyond the deals that you're currently working on or the one that's about to close. You talk about building a carbon market credit place, and this is something that theoretically would be done on chain at some point in the future, and trying to kind of centralize that and bring a place where. So, do you foresee a point in the future where Aqualibre becomes like just a carbon market credit place for everyone in the world, and they can just effectively do this, make these kinds of buys and sells on chain? Is that sort of the grand vision down the road?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the grand vision. There's going to be competitors for sure. But I mean, in the short term, we're looking for chain issuance of carbon credits. We've already got a framework for an integration with Fin on Kajira. So that will be for initial distribution, obviously, and obviously there down the line, we're looking for sort of minting contracts that will obviously deposit new tokens effectively as a limit order. The actual project developer's price, it'll allow anyone to sort of buy. So that's a short-term vision, which will be, happening almost imminently. That sort of infrastructure is there. The only hurdle for us to overcome is actually creating either a blockchain registry or obviously APIing into existing registries which hold the current credits. So a registry where the credits are there, and we obviously have to integrate into that. So anything that's happening on chain needs to obviously relay back to the registry and make sure that that finishing is accurate. The bigger vision, and something working on is again more of a global exchange, trying to get to be a first to market global exchange, because the race is currently on for, there's various exchanges up, but none that have actually particularly ticked all the institutional boxes. And that's something we're currently working on. I can't say too much about that. This is quite a large chapter in Aqualibre's roadmap. If we get this right now, we can certainly pop off a very, very large global exchange. And obviously that's a conversation probably for a future point, because it's still very early doors and we're actually under quite strict NDAs around this. But it's very exciting. I'm very, very, very excited, in fact, to be part of obviously those conversations, and those conversations have been actually introduced to Aqualibre, and we've been invited to be part of that exchange, shall I say, in the future. So watch this space. But I mean, we've got short and longer term plans on both fronts. That's the long and short of it.
No, that's a great response. The one thing I've been wondering too, like as you were saying that, would let's say in the future, global marketplace exists, Aqualibre is dominating, right? And has the ability to trace everything on chain through APIs, and it just goes to the other exchanges, and you're kind of like aggregating all the carbon credits in place. Will these only be something that like institutions would buy, or is it something like even puny investors like me, right? Like, could anybody basically start engaging in trading carbon swaps? Like, would they maybe be more valuable over time, where somebody could buy certain carbon swaps and then turn around and sell them months later to a particular institution who's looking for that Rolls Royce or whatever it may be? Is that something that's kind of on the roadmap, or would it strictly be just for the institutions?
Well, that is almost that's almost number one on the roadmap, because obviously us integrating with Fin, and actually, in the first instance, however many credits we put onto chain, the whole basis of that anyone can then acquire. That's not necessarily aimed at the big institutions. Yourself, you might have some Bitcoin, might you have some AQLA, might you have some ETH, might you have some Kuji in your wallet. You might have $100, $1,000, and they will be tradable and fungible like your tokens that you have in your wallet. And obviously on that basis, it just comes down to supply and demand. If people want to buy them off you, you say name your price, and then it goes up in value and it puts the spot price up. I mean, that's what we're working towards as well. So actually making them a tradable, fungible commodity, environmental commodity. And for example, for your business, you can simply acquire them, on chain. We can give you a nice Aqualibre hummingbird as a nice little certificate, a digital certificate of purchase. And whether you choose to retire those credits, which obviously takes them out of the market in entirety, which is where you can really claim your offset, or you choose to hold them and trade, that's entirely up to you.
Wow, really powerful stuff, and just sort of unleashing almost a new kind of like on-chain, almost DeFi primitive, right? Like where now people could have these kinds of carbon offsets that are fungible and could be traded. It's incredible. I do have some more questions rolling in for you, Joe. So this one, was again from Jerome. He says it's not an important question, but I think it's a great question still. He wonders why Aqua is in the name. And so that was something that he wanted to just ask.
To be honest, I don't actually know. I think it's just Aqualibre. It's like free flowing water. It's like, moving. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It was actually my CEO's, before he even actually approached me, he'd already had the name the Aqualibre project. And
I
I
like
think
it.
that's probably a question for Tony rather than me, because I'm not actually sure. But I've always liked the name.
Yeah, me too. And I
Obviously,
always just interpreted
AQLA,
it that.
AQLA, as people call it. It's sort of stuff that works.
Yeah, no, I took it as like free water. I think of the imagery, like you mentioned the hummingbird. I love all the graphics that you guys use, or just how like green is a great color, so it just really pops when you see some of the little ads and the videos and stuff that you guys use. Brett was asking, and we kind of talked a little bit about this before we started the actual show when we were just chatting in the studio. He was wondering, this is a great story. I'm sure it's going to capture everybody's mind here. How did you get into crypto, and why did you guys choose Kuji, for example, over Solana? Now, I know the story because you told me before we started, but and Jerome said it is a nice name. He just chimed in on the comments.
Well, strangely enough, we minted a load of tokens on Solana. So Solana was the original blockchain provider. I think one of the reasons why they were one of the most eco-friendly blockchains at that time, going back sort of 2.5 years. And the crypto side of things was obviously certainly Tony recognized that the carbon markets needed to be some more accountability, auditability, where blockchain came in. So off the back of that, that's where the crypto conversation started to come in. And obviously we ended up on Kujira was purely my fateful meeting with obviously Hans that night. And, crypto guys with a free background, and to meet someone that I could sort of sit down face to face. It didn't have an agenda, wasn't come on my exchange and pay me a load of stables, do this, do that, and or give us a load of tokens. There was no agenda. And the fit seemed quite real and nice for the business at the time. And it was as simple as that. So, I was happy to be one of the sort of, launch tokens on Pilot and Fusion that was a reasonable success. So it was that was it. That was the story. Can't say more than that.
Did Hans like just overhear you talking and then just kind of leaned in with his beer and be like, "Hey, you should."
It wasn't Hans. It was actually Hans's friend that he was with.
Okay.
And we were in a pub, and it wasn't even a busy pub, and they just happened to be on a table next to us. I was actually having a conversation with another onboard us onto sort of his chain and his marketing strategy, and it's one of those fateful nights, and we're very glad that we went down that path. We've got great relationship with the guys now, and they've helped us massively along our journey. So forever grateful.
Yeah, and I think we are too, right? I mean, it's one of these things where you couldn't have asked for better, serendipity, if you will. Just the fact that you were in this pub and happened to meet and have that conversation strike up. So I thought that was a really cool story when we started right before the recording. But I'm glad you got to share it again here. Beyond that, are there things that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we do talk about today before, because I know we've already been going for about 40 minutes, but I didn't know if there was enough ground that we had covered. And I know there's certain things we can't touch on just because of currently with NDAs and everything else, but.
Well, there's lots to cover in terms of, look, we've got, I mean, what I haven't, obviously everyone's sort of so transfixed on. But in the background, between obviously February and now, we haven't been sitting on our hands, twiddling our thumbs. In lots of business, lots of conversations. One of our main advisors on our panel Sean Yeo, who obviously acts for AMI, which is a big insurance brokerage in London. Just so people understand, I mean, Sean at the moment seems to be one of the sort of go-to guys if you've got carbon projects to sort of regarding insurance on various aspects of projects, and that in turn obviously turns round to Sean. Obviously, well, you need to speak to Aqualibre. They're the go-to guys. They're the guys building this, doing that, and blah blah blah. So, I mean, we've got a pipeline and a significant pipeline of projects. And look, we've got 5 government proposals around the world that are in at the moment under review, and these projects are significant. Now, they're not going to be monetized overnight. They're not. You know, these don't yield fruit tomorrow, but 6 months, a year, 2 years. The whole basis of Aqualibre is creating a long-term pipeline. We're not here for 6 months. Typical ski slope. Into nothing. We want to be a project that is sustainable, long term, and actually can be here for the test of time. Solid utility for the token that can obviously grow and grow and grow. So, the pipeline that we do have and we're building, I mean, as the carbon markets evolve, it's still difficult to get large deals done in the carbon credit space at this point in time. But next year, the year after, especially once we prove concept, because don't get me wrong, once this first deal is closed, we all want to be singing from the rooftops about it because it's a significant deal to the market. And at that point in time, it will bring the credibility, it will bring the trust, it will bring all of the unknown questions that people have obviously discussed or thought about the project. We've got 9 brokers that are signed under Aqualibre working within the City of London and other jurisdictions, have all got significant clients that need carbon credits. But we haven't unleashed any of them yet because at this point in time, it's all about let's do deal 1, prove concept, and move on. So, I mean, the point I'm trying to obviously make is Aqualibre isn't here for we're a long-term sustainable. Actually, is here to build long-term value. So, I don't care about the price next week. I don't care about the price a year down the line. Let's talk about the price in 5 years' time, 3 years' time, and then we'll.
The one last thing we didn't touch on for those who are watching, if you are a token holder, if you haven't already done so, you of course can stake your tokens. I just staked all of mine a while back, and that was one of the first sort of developments that we've seen on the technical side when you guys launched the staking platform. Is the next technical development just really starting to work on the marketplace, or is that we're still too far out from that and this is going to be maybe like another year before we even get to like the beginning of the marketplace?
The marketplace is reasonably imminent. I mean, most of the actual smart contract coding is there. It's a case of actually the biggest hurdle in that aspect relating to the carbon registries that currently exist. So it may be a case of Aqualibre purchases their own carbon credits as and not a project developers and bring them on chain ourselves, which obviously mitigates quite a few hurdles in that process. If not, we will obviously just integrate with one of our many project developers that we've obviously got existing relationships with. And most of them have got the technical ability. If not, we can certainly assist them with that and actually get some copying online, just even for the retail guys. The retail guy. We all have businesses. We all have SMEs. It's all again proof of concept. Is someone if we launch 1,000 carbon credits online and they all get acquired, great, brilliant. It's another proof of concept, isn't it? It's someone we've put a viable fungible product online and someone's bought it. Brilliant. And then we're not limited thereafter how many credits we've got access to.
So if you guys were to do that, let's say you start off by just rolling out your own carbon credits because it would facilitate, the process of acquiring them for other people. Would they just be verified before they go on chain? Like we talked about the whole stickiness of having a verifier to make sure that, they're legitimate.
They would be fully verified and insured if obviously purchasers want as well. So we wouldn't even bring credits on chain if they weren't verified, because we wouldn't be entitled to sell. They have to be verified, have to be and insured. So that be plastic fees. So they won't only just be verified. We'll have to around the credits as well, which
So
obviously would cover premiums on. So
your connection, your friend at the AMI that you mentioned just a moment ago, would he then help broker like some of those where you could actually, like Aqualibre itself could put those carbon credits on chain because he's in that position? I mean, I know he's not a verifier, but he obviously has the connections and you guys are working together to build the pipeline. So I figured those connections could bear
no,
fruit.
I mean he would obviously assist in actually getting the credits insured prior to us putting on chain. So any credits that we have on chain, we would have a premium in the background credits for any of the not in the previous carbon credit lifespan, going back 4 or 5 years, which you've seen all the documentaries on that obviously fud all the various stuff on carbon. So if you get insurance cover on credits, it covers another level of due diligence. So they don't just insure any old project. They're not going to insure any old verifier. So there's certain levels that you'd even get if you're going to insure something, as you know, as an insurance broker or issuer, you have to be happy with the product that you're insuring. So again, it's just another credibility factor. So yes, we've got the verification rubber stamp, and then yes, we get an insurance wrap to cover. With the actual institutional market, when they're significant amounts at cost, to have an insurance cover a wrap around those credits is basically like a backstop, isn't it? It's a comfort blanket that they can rely on if ever there was any issue with either the verifier or something happened with the project, that they don't get left holding the baby. They've got a piece of paper they can say, "Excuse me, I'll have my money back. Thank you very much." and that's what it's about.
Yeah, another question from Jerome. I thought this was an interesting one. So, like, if you were to buy a carbon credit, for instance, and you bought it on chain, does that person need to KYC?
I think on the retail level, and if we're doing on digitally, not. I think again with anything KYC, it comes over a certain level, doesn't it? Like anything, it's buying. If you wanted to buy $10,000 of our carbon credits, and at that point you might fall under KYC. If you're buying $100, $200, probably not. If we was to put significantly more on chain, and you want, then obviously we want to know who you are because you're a client. So, it's part of an onboarding process as much as the KYC. But if we're putting a sample on test that can be obviously integrated with Fin, then if you just want to buy $10, $20, $100, then no, KYC isn't required, and we're not too far. Anything, it comes down to thresholds, doesn't it?
No, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I see that certainly in our, the company I work for, where it's certain things like once you hit a certain milestone or number, there's additional due diligence or whatever the case may be. So that totally
Which
makes
is
sense.
just standard AML, framework.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You pay 5,000 into a bank, no one cares. You want to pay 50 grand into a bank, they want to know who you are and where it's come from.
Yeah. Yes, they do. We have, gosh, almost 90 people tuned in right now. So thank you for everybody who's been watching the conversation with Joe today. We have about 10 minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover and talk about before we end the conversation today, Joe?
Oh, well, don't really know. I think we've covered pretty much everything. I think it's nearly 10 o'clock at night here. My brain's frazzled. But it's no, I mean, look, I'll tell you what we are planning on doing, just as a aside, going into sort of early part of next year. We're looking to obviously get some guys together to actually go and film some of the projects that we're involved in, actually to show. And at that stage, obviously, once we completed deals and there's forward flows of money, we want to actually see not just from the carbon aspect, what has actually been done in terms of the ESG requirements on those projects, to actually show out of any carbon, only really a third, give or take, is for the rest of it is generally ESG. So it's going back to indigenous people, it's going on to actually benefit whatever projects and the surrounding areas of that project. So obviously, off the back of this deal, obviously it's a big thing for us to ensure that the forward flows of money are, allocated correctly. And we know that's going to happen because obviously our existing relationship with this particular project developer, and also it's one of the requirements of the buyer. So, and it'll be interesting to actually document that as part of, showing, because there's been so much FUD and all the rest of it around carbon credits historically, where, bad actors in terms of project developers have taken the money and run and put nothing back into the local ecosystems. Whereas actually, part of our story is, look, we've got our finger on the pulse. We know how much we've done, and also we know how to monitor the forward flows of money to ensure that we hold to account project developers who say they're going to do certain things and make sure they deliver on those things. So that'll be an interesting thing to document early part of next year, which again just great sort of PR articles for us as a project. And apart from that, I mean, yes, we'll be looking to expand our wings at some stage onto other exchanges as well, just purely to create additional liquidity. That's obviously on our roadmap equally. We obviously launched on MEXC, which was, okay. It's it's not it, but it's another liquidity pool. It's great, and it opens us up to a new community. And we'll be planning to do more of that in the forthcoming future. So, lots of stuff to look forward to, and appreciate everyone's patience, obviously getting to this stage of the journey.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time, especially seeing it's almost 10 o'clock at night your time and your brain's frazzled, Joe. But really enjoyed the conversation. I felt like I learned a ton in the process as someone who just sort of YOLO'd into the project because like I was reading such great things and I was excited about what you guys were building. And of course, a lot of great endorsements from KP, because I think now it makes a lot of sense just how close that you've been working with the primary Kujira team, and him knowing about what you guys are working on and stuff like that. So I'm super excited for the conclusion of your first deal, that proof of concept. Jerome, thanks for watching. He was just saying great interview. So thanks again for taking the time. Thank you for
There's one other thing.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, just one other thing. We possibly are organising a Aqualibre meetup in Lisbon of August. Last Friday, which I believe is 29th or 30th. But obviously, just keep an eye on the socials. We'll make it once we formalise that. Local, Portugal, UK, Europe, or that wants to come and chat with us, meet the team. Then obviously that's part of our little plan as well, equally. So which obviously coincides with hopefully closing off deal one. So it's sort of, it's not part of a launch party, but certainly will be lovely to see any of our community there to enjoy a beer and have a chat.
I wish I were in Lisbon instead of Tampa, Florida, because that seems like a great time. It'd be a good way to celebrate. But yeah, thanks again so much for taking the time, Joe.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your flexibility and working with me and getting the time. Enjoyed the conversation tremendously. Thank you for everybody who's tuned into this edition of Coach's Corner. This will be, it'll be in perpetuity, available on YouTube, so you can always watch it there. Because I know some people were telling me that they couldn't make the live feed. I'll also recirculate it on X. And be sure when you do get those big announcements coming, I'll share those as well on my feed from Coach Kuji. Again, thanks so much for everybody who's been watching, and Joe in particular, thanks so much for taking the time and having this conversation, sharing with everybody.
Funky, lovely. Enjoyed it very much, and hope everyone has a great weekend.
Yes, wonderful weekend, and I know you're about to leave for holiday, so I hope you enjoy that as well, my friend. Take care, everybody.
I will indeed. Right, take care all. Cheers.